Sir, this is your final opportunity to provide documentation.
On what legal basis is he detained? Where is your warrant?
Step back! Step back! You're interfering with federal.
Sometimes resistance looks like a man in a black beret standing between federal agents and an innocent man, refusing to move until they follow the very law they claim to enforce. On the morning of March 15, 2025, in the heart of Oakland's Fruitvale neighborhood, that's exactly what happened when Khalil Washington, a member of the new Black Panther Party doing community patrol, saw 3 ICE agents attempting to detain a black man named Darnell Morrison on his way to work. What the agents' body cams captured wasn't just an intervention. It was a masterclass in know your rights activism, community solidarity, and what happens when people refuse to let injustice unfold on their watch. By the time it was over, Darnell was free. The agents were facing disciplinary action. The footage had gone viral. And the image of that man in that black beret had become required viewing for anyone who believes that sometimes the only thing standing between oppression and justice is an ordinary person who decides they've seen enough. Stay with me, because every single detail of this story matters. And by the end, you'll understand exactly why what happened on that Oakland sidewalk will be studied for years to come. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now. Stories like these need to be told. Stories like these need to be shared. Your support is what keeps the truth coming to light. Now, let's go back to that morning. The morning of March 15, 2025 was the kind of morning Oakland gets in early spring. Blue skies, mild temperatures, the whole city blinking into life under soft California sunshine. March in the Bay Area means you can be outside without a jacket. Comfortable enough that the streets fill up early. People heading to BART stations. People heading to work. People living their daily lives in a city that has always been, at its core, a city of ordinary people just trying to make it. The Fruitvale neighborhood, sometimes spelled Fruitvale, a community that has long been the beating heart of Black and Latino life in Oakland. Shops opening their iron gates. Buses rolling through intersections. The smell of pan dulce from the bakery on the corner. The sound of Spanish radio drifting from a doorway. Life, in all its mundane and precious detail, was already happening. And into that ordinary morning, 3 federal agents drove a dark SUV. Let's talk about who these people were. Because in a story about identity, belonging, and the right to simply exist on a sidewalk, knowing who each person is, really is, matters. Darnell Morrison, 38 years old. Born in Detroit, Michigan. Raised in Oakland. A black man who had lived in the Bay Area for 16 years, longer than most of the agents who would one day stop him on a sidewalk had been with the federal government. Darnell worked as a senior systems analyst for a hospital network downtown. A man who had built his life methodically, carefully, with intention. He was married. He had a daughter named Imani, 8 years old. He coached her soccer team on weekends. On that Tuesday morning, Darnell was doing what he did every Tuesday morning. He was walking to the Fruitvale BART station. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, earbuds in. Just another commuter starting another workday. He left his apartment at 7:42 a.m. He would not make his train. He would not arrive at work on time. He would spend the next 18 minutes of his life being forced to prove, to 3 armed federal agents, that he had the right to walk down the street in his own neighborhood. In his own city. In his own country. Khalil Washington, 29 years old. Born and raised in Oakland. A community organizer who had joined the new Black Panther Party 2 years earlier after watching too many of his neighbors harassed, stopped, questioned, and in some cases disappeared by law enforcement. He wasn't a hothead. He wasn't looking for confrontation. He was the kind of young man who showed up, to community meetings, to neighborhood cleanups, to voter registration drives, to schools where he talked to kids about knowing their rights. That morning, Khalil was doing what the Panthers had always done, community patrol. Walking the neighborhood. Checking on elders. Making sure people felt safe. Wearing the distinctive black beret and jacket that announced his presence, his commitment, his refusal to let his community be treated like enemy territory. He had his phone on him. He had his laminated Know Your Rights card. He had 2 years of legal training from the party's workshops. And he had something the ICE agents did not account for. He was already on International Boulevard when the dark SUV pulled over. Special Agent Victor Chin, Asian American, mid-30s, 6 years with ICE. Special Agent Tamara Williams, black, late 20s, 3 years in the field. Special Agent Roberto Sanchez, Latino, early 40s, 9 years with the agency. 3 federal agents conducting what they called targeted enforcement operations in immigrant communities, looking for people who matched descriptions in their database. They saw Darnell walking down International Boulevard, and they decided he looked like someone worth questioning. No tip. No warrant. No database match. Just an assumption. Based on appearance. Based on location. That decision, casual, unconsidered, made in seconds, would cost them everything. The body cam footage begins at 7:45 a.m. We know this because it was entered into evidence. All 3 cameras, Chin's, Williams's, and Sanchez's, were running. The footage is clear. The audio is clear. And every second of it tells a story the agents wish had never been recorded. We see the SUV pull over on International Boulevard. We see 3 agents step out. We see them spot Darnell on the sidewalk, walking, minding his own business, earbuds in, no awareness that anything is about to happen. Agent Chin moves to the front. He steps directly into Darnell's path. Blocks him. Darnell stops. Pulls out one earbud. Looks at the agent. Confused. Agent Chin. Excuse me. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to see your identification. And right there, in those first 10 seconds, the encounter goes sideways. Because Darnell's face shifts from confusion to something else. Something the agents should have paid attention to. He's not afraid. He's offended. Darnell. My identification? I'm just walking to work. Agent Chin. We need to verify your immigration status. ID, please. Darnell. Immigration status. I'm American. I was born in Detroit. Williams moves closer. Her hand goes near her belt. Not drawn, but near. Agent Williams. Sir, we still need to see identification. Driver's license, passport, something proving citizenship. Darnell. I don't carry my birth certificate to catch the BART. I live here. I work downtown. Why are you stopping me? Agent Williams. Sir, we need to see your identification. You're being detained for immigration verification. Darnell. Detained. I'm being detained. I'm an American citizen. This is insane. Darnell looks around. He pulls out his phone. His hands are steady. And he starts recording. The agents don't like that. You can see it on the body cam, the slight shift in posture. Sanchez steps forward. Chin's jaw tightens. Williams glances at the camera. But what none of them see, what they cannot see, is the man in the black beret who has just come around the corner. Khalil Washington appears on Chin's body cam at 7:47 a.m. He's moving quickly. Phone already out. Eyes locked on the situation. He reads it in seconds. 3 federal agents, 1 black man, distress clear on the man's face. He doesn't hesitate. Khalil. Excuse me, what's going on here? Agent Chin. Sir, step back. This doesn't concern you. Khalil ignores the command. He looks directly at Darnell. Khalil. Brother, did you ask for help? On the body cam, you can see the moment Darnell sees Khalil. Relief, pure and immediate, floods his face. Darnell. Yes. They're trying to detain me. I told them I'm American, but they won't listen. Khalil positions himself between Darnell and the agents. His body language is protective, not aggressive. He doesn't touch anyone. He doesn't raise his voice. He stands on the public sidewalk as if he has every right to be there, because he does. Khalil. He said he's American. On what basis are you detaining him? Agent Sanchez. Sir, this is federal business. Step back or you'll be arrested for obstruction. Khalil. Then arrest me. But you're not taking him without probable cause. And here's the thing about that moment. The thing that made Khalil Washington different from every bystander who has ever looked away. He wasn't bluffing. He genuinely did not care if they arrested him. He had made a calculation that his freedom, at least temporarily, was less important than preventing the illegal detention of this man. That kind of courage isn't performance. It's principle. And the agents had no idea what to do with it. I need you to sit with that for a second. Because we live in a world where most people keep walking. Where most people pull out their phones to film but don't step in. Khalil stepped in. He used his body as a barrier. He used his knowledge as a weapon. What does that mean to you? Tell me in the comments, because this is the conversation we need to be having. For the next several minutes, the sidewalk on International Boulevard became a courtroom. And Khalil Washington became the most effective defense attorney that Darnell Morrison never had to hire. Agent Chin. Conducting immigration enforcement. Final warning. Move aside. Khalil. He invoked his right to remain silent and requested an attorney. You have no warrant. What is your legal justification? The agents exchange looks. Chin tries a different angle. Agent Chin. This doesn't concern you. Khalil. It concerns me when federal agents violate a citizen's rights in our community. The law requires you to release him. We're all recording this. And they were. Because what the agents hadn't anticipated, what they never anticipate, because they always assume that the presence of federal badges will scatter people, is that Oakland knows how to show up. Other people on the street had stopped. Phones out. Recording. A store owner came out from behind his counter. An elderly woman called out from her doorway asking if everything was okay. A man walking his dog crossed the street to get closer. Within 2 minutes, there were at least a dozen people watching. Documenting. Bearing witness. Khalil reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a laminated card, Know Your Rights information published by the ACLU and immigrant rights organizations. He'd carried it every day for 2 years. Khalil. Brother, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to refuse to answer questions about your immigration status. You have the right to speak to an attorney. You do not have to show them documents unless they have a warrant signed by a judge with your name on it. Darnell's hands were shaking. But his voice was getting stronger. Darnell. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I want to speak to an attorney. The crowd was growing. More phones recording. Someone went live on Instagram. A man in the back called out, "Leave him alone. He didn't do anything." Another voice, "We see you. We're recording everything." Chin reached for his radio. Agent Chin. We need backup. Multiple people interfering with enforcement. Khalil. We're not interfering. We're witnessing. This man has invoked his rights. You have no probable cause for this detention. The law requires you to release him. Williams tried a different approach, going around Khalil, speaking directly to Darnell. Agent Williams. Sir, if you're a citizen, just show us ID and this can be over in 30 seconds. Khalil. He doesn't have to prove his innocence. You have to have probable cause for detention. Being a black man and walking to work is not probable cause. Agent Sanchez. Sir, you're obstructing a federal investigation. Khalil. I'm exercising my First Amendment right to witness and document law enforcement activity. What specific articulable facts led you to believe this man violated immigration law? Silence. The agents had no answer. And every second they stood there without one, the body cams were rolling. Agent Chin. He matches a description we're working from. Khalil. What description? Be specific. What were those characteristics? Clothing? Behavior? Or just black man walking down a street? Chin's jaw tightened. No answer. A car pulled up. Second parking spot back. A woman got out, Amara Davis, another Panther member, wearing the same black beret. She had a legal pad and a camera. She started documenting badge numbers, names, timestamps. Amara Davis. Officers, I'm documenting this interaction. Badge numbers, please. Agent Sanchez. You don't have authority to demand our badge numbers. Amara. Actually, under California law, officers must identify themselves when requested by a civilian. You are operating in our state. Your names and badge numbers, please. The three agents exchanged looks. This wasn't going how they planned. A simple stop had turned into a documented confrontation with community organizers who knew the law, surrounded by witnesses recording everything. They were outnumbered. Not by force. By knowledge. By organization. By a community that had been preparing for exactly this moment. Dramatic pause, music shifts. Chin tried once more. Agent Chin. Sir, final opportunity. Show identification or we're placing you in custody. Khalil. On what charge? What crime has he committed? What law has he broken? Agent Chin. Failure to provide documentation during an immigration investigation. Khalil. That is not a crime. American citizens have no legal obligation to carry proof of citizenship on their person. Try again. Agent Williams. You're interfering with federal officers. Khalil. I am standing on a public sidewalk, recording public servants performing their public duties, and informing a citizen of his constitutional rights. Which of those activities is illegal? No answer. Because there was no answer. Every statement the agents made, Khalil met with the law. Not shouting. Not threatening. Not escalating. Just the law. Clear. Steady. Immovable. He was like water filling every crack in their position until the structure could not hold. What Khalil was doing in those moments takes years of preparation. He didn't improvise that legal knowledge on the spot. The Panthers had trained him. Community organizations had taught him. That's what preparation looks like in the real world, not just knowing your rights, but knowing them so well that you can cite them under pressure, surrounded by armed federal agents, without your voice shaking. Comment below, how many of you know your rights well enough to do what Khalil did? Be honest. A BART police officer appeared at 7:53 a.m., Officer Lisa Park, a Korean-American woman who had worked the Fruitvale area for years. She knew Khalil from community meetings. She had seen this kind of ICE operation before. She pushed through the crowd, took in the scene, ICE agents, a black man clearly distressed, a Panther member documenting everything, witnesses everywhere, a news van now pulling up at the end of the block. Officer Park. What's going on here? Agent Chin. Federal Immigration Enforcement. We need you to clear these people. Officer Park looked at the crowd. Looked at Darnell. Looked at Khalil. Looked back at the agents. Officer Park. Do you have a warrant? Agent Chin. We're conducting administrative immigration enforcement. Officer Park. That's not what I asked? Is there a judicial warrant with his name on it? Chin hesitated. Agent Chin. No, but... Officer Park. Then he has the right to leave unless you're charging him with a crime. Are you charging him with a crime? Agent Chin. He's being detained for immigration verification. Officer Park turned to Darnell. Officer Park. Sir, are you a U.S. citizen? Darnell. Yes. I was born in Detroit. I have lived in Oakland for 16 years. I am just trying to get to work. She turned back to the ICE agents. Officer Park. He states he's a citizen. He's invoked his right to remain silent and requested an attorney. Unless you have probable cause or a warrant, you need to let him go. Agent Williams. This is federal jurisdiction. Officer Park. And this is Oakland. You're not taking anyone from this sidewalk without legal justification. Show me a warrant or explain your probable cause, because right now this looks like harassment. Khalil. Officer Park is right. You approached this man without reasonable suspicion. He's told you he's a citizen. He's invoked his rights. There is no legal basis to detain him further. Agent Chin. We'll determine what legal basis we have. Khalil. You already determined that. And you came up empty. That's why you're stalling. That's why you cannot articulate probable cause. That's why you're hoping he'll just comply, to prove something he has no legal obligation to prove. The standoff continued for another 3 minutes. 3 federal agents insisting on authority they could not demonstrate. Khalil and Amara documenting everything. Officer Park standing firm. The crowd growing larger. More phones recording. The local news van now fully positioned. And then, finally, Agent Chin made a decision. Agent Chin. We'll verify his status at another time. He's free to go. Khalil didn't move. Khalil. That sounds like a threat. Are you planning to harass this man again? Agent Chin. If we have cause to question his citizenship, we'll do so legally. Khalil. You didn't have cause this time. What makes you believe you'll have cause next time? Officer Park stepped in. Officer Park. Sir, you're free to go. These agents have no legal basis to detain you. If they approach you again without a warrant, call 911 and request Oakland PD. We will respond. Darnell Morrison stood still for a moment. Breathing. Processing. The adrenaline and the fear and the relief all mixing together in his body. He looked at Khalil. He looked at Amara. He looked at the crowd, his neighbors, strangers, people who had stopped their mornings to stand with him. Darnell. Thank you? Just 2 words. But you could hear everything in them. Khalil walked with Darnell to the BART station. Amara followed, making sure he got through the turnstile, onto the platform, onto the train, safely, before the ICE agents could change their minds. The entire interaction, from the moment Chin stepped in front of Darnell to the moment Darnell boarded the train, took 18 minutes. 18 minutes that would change everything. The body cam footage went public within hours. ICE had no choice. There were too many civilian recordings, too many witnesses, too much documentation for the agency to contain it. The local Oakland news ran the story that evening. By the following morning, national outlets had picked it up. By the end of the week, the video had been viewed more than 40 million times. The image of Khalil Washington standing between ICE agents and Darnell Morrison, beret on, phone raised, body steady, voice calm, became iconic. It was shared by civil rights organizations. It was shown in law school classrooms. It was printed on posters. It was projected on the side of buildings during protests in 3 cities. But none of that meant anything unless it led to accountability. And Darnell Morrison wasn't done. The complaints came fast. Darnell filed one with IC, one with the city of Oakland, and one with multiple civil rights organizations. Khalil filed on his behalf with oversight agencies. The ACLU got involved. The Asian Law Caucus. The National Lawyers Guild. By the end of March, the pressure was building from every direction. ICE's internal investigation launched in April. And what it found, documented in a report completed in June, was damning. The agents had no tip about Darnell specifically. No warrant. No database match. They had approached him solely because he was a black man walking in a neighborhood with a significant immigrant population, and they had assumed he might be undocumented. When investigators asked why they thought a black man in Oakland might be undocumented, the agents couldn't articulate a reason beyond, quote, gut feeling and experience. When investigators asked what about Darnell's behavior was suspicious, the agents had no answer. He was walking to work with coffee. He had earbuds in. That's not suspicious behavior. That's Tuesday morning in America. The investigation report concluded that the agents had violated ICE's own policies on reasonable suspicion, had failed to demonstrate probable cause, and had created unnecessary confrontation by refusing to release someone who had invoked his rights. Recommendations: retraining, written reprimands, temporary suspension. But Darnell Morrison wanted more than internal discipline. He wanted accountability that would outlast a memo. Quick pause. We're about halfway through this story, and I want to ask you something. When ICE says an investigation concluded that agents violated policy, is that enough? Should federal agents face the same legal consequences as anyone else who illegally detains a person? Drop your answer below. This matters. Darnell Morrison filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in July 2025. His attorney was James Tucker, a veteran civil rights lawyer who had spent 30 years fighting cases exactly like this one. Tucker took the case pro bono. He said publicly that he had been waiting for a case with this level of documentation for his entire career. The lawsuit named 3 defendants: Special Agent Victor Chin, Special Agent Tamara Williams, and Special Agent Roberto Sanchez, personally. And it named ICE as an agency. The charges were comprehensive: unlawful detention, racial profiling, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The discovery process revealed something that went far beyond the events of March 15th, something that turned a case about one man on one morning into a case about a pattern, a systematic, documented, undeniable pattern. Chin, Williams, and Sanchez had made 47 stops in the 6 months prior to Darnell's detention in Oakland neighborhoods. Of those 47 stops, 43 were of people of color. Of those 43, 31 were released after it was determined they were citizens or legal residents. Let me say that again so it lands properly. 66% of their stops ended with no action because the person they detained hadn't done anything wrong. Nearly 2/3. These agents were right about the people they stopped less than one time in 3. The pattern was unmistakable. They were stopping people based on race and location, not on evidence, not on behavior, not on tips, not on warrants. It was racial profiling with federal badges and federal authority. Attorney Tucker described it in a pretrial filing. These agents did not conduct immigration enforcement. They conducted an ongoing program of racial harassment under the color of federal law. The evidence is overwhelming, the pattern is clear, and the harm is real. The case was set for trial in October 2025. The courtroom was packed. Community members filled the gallery every single day. Local media covered every hour of testimony. Civil rights organizations sent observers. Law students crowded into the overflow room where the proceedings were broadcast on a monitor. Because this wasn't just Darnell Morrison's case anymore. It had become a referendum. On what immigration enforcement is allowed to look like. On what community resistance is allowed to look like. On whether the Fourth Amendment means anything when a federal badge is present. The jury watched the body cam footage. All 3 cameras. The same scene from 3 different angles, in perfect synchronization. Darnell being stopped. Khalil appearing. The crowd gathering. Officer Park demanding justification the agents couldn't provide. The agents backing down only when faced with a community that would not move. Darnell Morrison took the stand. His testimony was quiet, measured, and devastating. Darnell, testimony. I was walking to work. I do it every single day. And suddenly 3 people with guns were demanding I prove I am American. I was born in Detroit. My parents were born in Michigan. My grandparents were born in Georgia. How far back do I have to go? How many generations do I need to produce before I'm allowed to walk down a street in my own city without being treated like a suspect? His voice broke when he described the moment he understood they might actually take him. Darnell, testimony. I kept thinking about my daughter. I kept thinking, she's going to wake up and go to school and I'm not going to be there. I kept thinking, what if Khalil hadn't come around that corner? What if no one had stepped in? Would I have missed work? Would I have lost my job? Would I have been put in a detention facility for days, weeks, while they verified what I had been telling them from the very first second, that I am American? The only thing that saved me was that man. And the community that stood with him. His therapist testified about the PTSD diagnosis. The anxiety attacks. The way Darnell now maps his route to work to avoid the block where it happened. The hypervigilance around law enforcement. The way his heart rate spikes when he sees any federal vehicle. The nightmares. The way he checks and rechecks the lock on his door before bed. The way he has, to this day, not walk to BART alone. Expert witnesses testified about racial profiling, about the psychological impact of being detained without cause, about how community intervention can prevent unlawful arrests and protect civil rights in the moment, not years later in a courtroom. Dr. Lawrence Chin, a sociologist who had studied immigration enforcement patterns for 2 decades, testified about what the discovery data revealed. Dr. Lawrence Chin, testimony. When 66% of your stops result in release because the person you detained is a citizen or legal resident, that is not effective enforcement. That is systematic violation of people's rights. The numbers show a pattern of stopping people based on how they look and where they are standing, not on any evidence of immigration violations. Professor Diana Washington, constitutional law expert from UC Berkeley, explained the legal framework in terms the jury would not forget. Prof. Diana Washington, testimony. The Fourth Amendment protects every person in the United States from unreasonable search and seizure. Immigration status is not an exception. ICE agents must have reasonable articulable suspicion of an immigration violation before they may detain someone. Walking to work while black is not reasonable suspicion. It never has been. It never will be. The agents violated Mr. Morrison's constitutional rights the moment they stepped in front of him without cause. Khalil Washington took the stand. The defense attorney tried to paint him as an agitator, someone who had shown up looking for confrontation. Khalil's testimony was calm, precise, unshakable. Khalil, testimony. I didn't approach looking for a fight. I approached because I saw a black man being detained by federal agents, and he was clearly distressed. I asked if he needed help. He said yes. I asked the agents for their probable cause. They couldn't articulate one. I stood on a public sidewalk and exercised my First Amendment right to witness and document a law enforcement action. That is not obstruction. That is civic participation. Defense attorney. But you physically positioned yourself between the agents and Mr. Morrison. Isn't that obstruction? Khalil, testimony. I stood on a public sidewalk. I did not touch anyone. I did not threaten anyone. I did not prevent them from performing a lawful action. I prevented them from performing an unlawful one. There is a difference. And I would do it again tomorrow. Officer Lisa Park testified about what she observed, and about the broader context. Officer Park, testimony. Those agents had no legal basis for that detention. Mr. Washington was right to question their authority. Citizens have the right to witness law enforcement actions, to document them, to demand that officers explain their legal justification. That is not obstruction. That is democracy in practice. Attorney Tucker's closing argument lasted 45 minutes. But the heart of it, the sentence that everyone in the courtroom wrote down, was this. James Tucker, closing. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. 3 federal agents stopped a man who was committing no crime, violating no law, doing nothing except existing while black in his own neighborhood. They demanded he prove his citizenship. He told them he was American. They didn't believe him. The only thing that prevented his illegal arrest was a community member who knew the law and refused to look away. That is not how America is supposed to work. In America, you are innocent until proven guilty. You do not have to prove you belong here. They have to prove you don't. And they couldn't. Because Darnell Morrison has belonged here his entire life. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. 7 hours to weigh what the body cam had captured in 18 minutes. When they returned, the courtroom was silent enough to hear the air conditioning. The verdict was unanimous on all counts. Liable. Damages, $850,000. $350,000 in compensatory damages for Darnell's trauma, his ongoing anxiety, the ongoing disruption to his life. $500,000 in punitive damages, split among the 3 agents and IC, designed not just to compensate, but to send a message. To deter. To say, clearly and finally, this cannot happen again. The verdict came down on November 18, 2025. I want to close with something that hasn't been said enough in the coverage of this story. Khalil Washington didn't save Darnell Morrison because he was exceptional. He saved him because he was prepared. There's a difference, and that difference matters enormously. Exceptional means rare. Exceptional means most people can't do it. Exceptional means we point at a person and say they're special and then keep walking, because being special is not something you become on purpose. Prepared means trainable. Prepared means teachable. Prepared means the next Khalil Washington is in your neighborhood right now, and the only question is whether they've been given the tools. The Panthers trained Khalil for 2 years before March 15th happened. 2 years of legal education. 2 years of community patrol. 2 years of Know Your Rights workshops. 2 years of being taught, over and over, that your presence, your informed, calm, documented, legally grounded presence, is itself a form of protection. That is not exceptional. That is a program. A system. A methodology. And it worked. Which brings me to the question I want to leave you with. Not a rhetorical question. An actual question that I want you to answer in your own life, after you close this video. If you had been on that sidewalk, not as Darnell, not as Khalil, but as one of the dozen people who stopped and pulled out their phones, what would you have done? Would you have stayed on the periphery? Would you have stepped in? Would you have known what to say? Would you have known when to say it? And if the answer is no, what are you going to do about that? Because the next March 15th is already being scheduled. Somewhere in this country, on some ordinary morning when someone is just trying to get to work, it is going to happen again. And the question is whether there will be someone wearing a black beret who has done the preparation. Khalil Washington was 29 years old on the morning he stood between federal agents and an innocent man and refused to move. He was 29 years old and prepared. How old are you? And what are you waiting for? If this story moved you, if this story made you think, share it. Not for the algorithm. Because the people in your life need to hear it. Because this is what community looks like. Because knowing your rights is not enough. You have to know other people's rights too. Hit subscribe if you haven't. And leave me a comment telling me the one thing from this story that you're going to carry with you. I read every single one. Until next time, stay informed, stay ready, and do not look away.